Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 766. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. This week, the Software Process and Measurement Cast features our interview with Ben Johnson, founder of Particle 41. Ben and I discussed the importance of teams, communication, and dependability. Ben Johnson, founder of Particle 41, is a serial entrepreneur with a track record of success. He is a results-driven leader, skilled in managing high-functioning teams for exceptional outcomes. Ben cultivates collaboration, motivation, and effective communication. As a leader, he aligns teams' efforts with organizational goals and drives innovation. Ben delivers complex projects with visibility, velocity, and vision, and is committed to sharing expertise for growth of others. Are you ready to take a deep dive into teams? It's time for the conversation. Ben Johnson, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Ben, as a founder of Particle 41, before we dive in, Particle 41, what is Particle 41 and what's your role other than founder?
Yeah, so we're a global software consultancy. We focus on flexible terms of engagement. We're led by 4 CTOs that have been CTOs in the past for Fortune 5000 companies. And we're really like an engineering team in a box. We cover software development, data engineering, data science, and DevOps or cloud engineering. Pretty diverse, flexible group. And we've been around for a while. And my main role is really looking for folks that want to use software to move their business forward and accelerate their growth with software.
Flexible rules of engagement?
I mean, we can spin up a team, spin down a team. We can augment. If you have a skills gap, we can augment just that skills gap, or we can give you the full Agile team in a box ready to go.
The word team, I think, is something that gets used a ton. I don't know what it actually means anymore, but the whole concept of putting together people, focused on a specific goal, how important is that to actually getting work done?
Well, I'd say it's pretty important. You need to be able to depend on the guy to your left or the gal to your right and make sure that they do what they say you're going to do so you can focus on your core expertise.
Once upon a time in the world, in software development, if you go back before my hair was actually gray, there was a lot of individualism. People, you could trust the person in the office 3 or 4 doors down or 3 or 4 cubes down or whatever, right? But really wasn't team. What makes a team a team? Other than, I guess you could always trust somebody, but what makes a team?
Well, you have to be united on a common goal or, a common result. I think it starts with that. So a team is somebody that agrees that they all want to accomplish, that thing, whatever that thing is. And a team is a group of people that are committed to that. And then they talk about the system and the process in which they'll agree to. We have this concept of team agreements inside of Particle, where we get the goal or the mission from the client, and then we come up with a team agreement. When we're going to meet, how are we going to organize? How are we going to share information with each other? How are we going to work through a work list together? And we put all of that in the team agreement. Everybody agrees to that, and we kind of move forward with that methodology.
I'm always intrigued as to organizations that have such a deep culture of team. What happens when you work with a client that is far less team-oriented and sees that boundary of team as sort of amorphous or porous?
I don't know how much I've run across that, and our culture is so deep team that I think what most clients want is the outcome. And they will perhaps try different ways to achieve the outcome. But with such a defined process and a strong definition of team, then I think they realize that, okay, these are my rules of engagement and how I get the most out of the team. And then the team is committed to the outcome. So I don't know that we've had too many folks try to treat us like individuals, because that's a lot more work for them when they bring things to the team in the way that we've asked and the way we've agreed upon, it usually creates a lot of efficiency. And then they see that efficiency and they kind of get on board with our process.
Do you see that transfer into their operation at some point?
Oh, certainly. We've had a lot of clients that have teams internally. They have folks that they've hired and have good relationship with. We're meeting maybe a skills gap with the existing team, or maybe we're covering a different part of the stack. And as we bring our idea of team and our idea of process and how to get work done, we've definitely brought that into the team at large, and everybody was happier to contribute with that way of doing that. So yeah, we do some agile coaching and some project management that kind of moves outside of just our boundary of our individuals.
How do you, if you're spinning up your own teams, how do you actually create that team culture? Because let's face it, especially in the US, we have a low sort of power tolerance, and people like to be rugged individuals. And so teamwork sometimes, again, I think we all believe in it, but that's not really, we struggle with the definition. So how do you actually generate that team culture?
Well, two things generate that really quickly. One, not having too much management. Management is kind of a bad word. We really like to see self-managed teams. We realize that maybe our QA teammates become really good organizers and can help. But management for management's sake, I think everybody's played, at this point, probably most of your audience has played an agile game or two. And in an agile game, bounce the ball, and then they put a manager in, and the ball would have to go through the manager. And we saw examples of how inefficient that was. So I think your level of management, and if the management is really command and control, that will totally inhibit the growth of what is this combined team, especially if you're talking about internal teammates or people that are hired directly by the company and people who are outsourced, and trying to construct this hybrid team of kind of two different payment models. You put a manager inside of that's kind of delegating all the work and really command control, it definitely will inhibit. The other way we see team happen is when we do what we say we do and we own our area. And this takes a little bit of time, but the first time that there's that, where the team agreed that, hey, by this certain date, or, we would get this milestone done. We've kind of all committed to it. We knew it was coming. And then to see each individual give that extra 110% to help each other, those situations, while they're, less than fun because we're all kind of putting in that extra elbow grease, those are bonding moments for a hybrid team. So that now, regardless of where you are in the world, that there's somebody there that will do whatever it takes to hit the goal, right? And so I think you want to manage, allow the team to make their own commitments so they don't end up in those situations as leaders. We want to make sure that we're not arbitrarily deciding that this body of work needs to be done by a certain date. But when the team organically makes a commitment and then they come through, their teammates notice that. And you have bonding, and that of course takes a little bit of time, but I think that's essential to have like solid team where people know they can depend on each other.
So if you were to pick the attribute of a team that makes it work the best, what would that attribute be?
Dependability. Like when I ask somebody to take care of something and they take care of it, they communicate with me. That dependability, our core values are visibility, velocity, and vision. And so that visibility is essential. If I'm given play-by-plays on a piece that I own that's critical, and I'm given play-by-plays to the rest of the team, that also helps a ton. But dependability is what our core values are trying to create, right? Our velocity, our vision, and the visibility, we kind of think of those as the formula for the end result, which is being perceived as dependable.
How did you get there? That's an approach that I think a lot of organizations would really want to be at, having been involved with a lot of agile organizations or not agile organizations. That's what they're all looking for, and many of them struggle with that. So how did you get there?
Well, the first thing we did is we said every member of the team is a client communicator. So every member of the team should share with the client what they accomplished that day. We kind of took that agile stand-up concept and we just made it part of our DNA. We just said, why don't we just do this? So when you're working with a team at Particle 41, you'll get a daily update from each individual from the team. Hey, this is what I got done today. And this idea of making every day count. And that was just an essential ingredient. So we enforce that. We make sure that happens. And we also make sure that any team member that we bring in is comfortable with that level of communication. You're not going to be communicated to the end customer. You are going to have to communicate to. And that, for most professionals, that's great. I'm not going to have to stand behind some manager. The other thing we realized is that expertise is currency. So in any given situation, if you are the expert, if you've done this before, then you automatically are given authority. And we don't really even talk about it. It just happens. But we acknowledge that expertise is currency. So, if you want to move forward, go learn something new and share it with the team. And that kind of learning culture, learning, teaching, training, unsticking, that part of the culture became apparent really quickly. That, the way to feel good about your profession is how you're growing in expertise and how you're helping others.
As a consultancy, and I've always been intrigued by this, the whole concept of OKRs, when they're done right, how does that actually work in a consultancy where you're really dealing with a lot of client-based kind of needs and desires that you're delivering?
Yeah, I would say it is pretty light at the corporate level. Like our OKRs are pretty light. It's number of engagements, of course, number of teammates. We also have one right now that's the number of certifications because we're trying to expand some of our specifically like cloud engineering types of certifications. And so I have my 4 or 5 OKRs. When it trickles down to the next row of team leads, then we're looking for really like an engagement score with the process, like the agile maturity. And we're looking at like, hey, am I part of a team that checks all the boxes in terms of our process? Is there any way that I can consult with the client? And then we look for some measurements of, hey, we were at level 1 when we started. Now we're at level 4. And a lot of that has to do with also the client. We're encouraging the client to think, first just 2 weeks ahead of the team. Then we're encouraging them to try to get to 4 or 6 weeks ahead of the team in terms of their strategy. And then if that seems to be a blocker, then we're providing additional services to help move them to that point. We see the magic happen when the team has 4 to 6 weeks of work out in front of them that's planned and understood by the team. Then we see off the charts velocity numbers. So our OKRs at the mid tier. So my corporate ones, and then you get down and we're really looking at like, what's the health of these projects that we're working on individually? And then we're sharing that with the client so that they understand that we're looking across many active engagements in many enterprises, and we're bringing those best practices to them and kind of letting them know where they sit on the scale. And we'd like to partner with them to bring their maturity up. So we have an agile maturity model, a DevOps maturity model, a data science maturity model, and we're scoring the engagement on those things and then making that a part of our OKRs. And so over time, we just like to see that the clients are becoming more mature because of our consulting.
So how important is it the client actually does increase in maturity?
It is important in the sense that we've at least made sure that it's known that these are the issues. There are no perfect projects. There are no easy projects. There are no projects that rocket ship up the maturity curve. There are some folks that are making a big investment in what they're doing, and so they really listen. There are some folks that are kind of, the adoption curve is almost happening in every project. So if this project is kind of like towards its end of life and we're doing maybe more of a supportive role, then we're also looking for, okay, well, when you start the new thing, the growth thing, can we leverage some of these new tactics? So sometimes you kind of have to let the maturity, what it was, be what it was, and then say, hey, but by the way, the barrier has reduced. It is easier to follow these best practices now than it ever was. So let's start off right as we do the new growth things. And we have to be wise on that. Does it score against the team if they're on a lower maturity? No, but do they tell the client, and is the client aware? And then what is the plan? And do we have that documented? That's still going to give the team a good score.
I want to go back just a hair. You mentioned having, 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 6 months worth of backlog understood and ready. I paraphrase. What's the magic there? Why is that? Why does that help a team then, rocket in terms of velocity?
Yeah. So 4 to 6 weeks is what we have found. So it is kind of just in time. We think 4 to 6 weeks is just in time. The reason why that's so important, because it first shows that there are folks dedicated to the what. Like, what do we want to build? Why do we want to build it? There are folks on the client side that are thinking about or leveraging services from us to think about the future and where they want to be. And so that means there's a strategic plan. Then there's somebody who's actually said, okay, how are we going to do that? And they're just far enough ahead of the developers where the developers are not waiting for work. When you have software development teams that are kind of hand to mouth with that level of work, then you will see a reduction in velocity, but you won't be able to manage it that way because you don't know what you don't know. So imagine that there is really 1,000 orders to ship, but you've only recorded that you have 100 orders. You don't know that delta between that 100, those 900 orders that are missing. If those were there, then the team could kind of adjust and understand that, okay, well, if we do these certain things now, we'll actually accelerate product development. And so closing those unknowns sooner. And I think, the 4 to 6 weeks, the 2 to 3 sprints, if you're doing 2-week sprints, is a great sign of backlog health. If you're that far ahead, then it means that the developers and your architects and your people who are trying to really create the solution are able to think out in front a bit and potentially cut corners, save time, and keep the quality up.
I just wanted to make sure I could go back to that one, 1832. The idea of, obviously, the outcome is what most clients are looking for. Internally, which is, how do you manage the push and pull of effectiveness versus efficiency?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's a silver bullet there, as much as it's really hard to fake 4 to 6 weeks worth of backlog. Like, it's really hard to fake that. And, when you have, like, now we're all remote, right? So post-COVID, we're all remote. Those planning meetings that it takes to get those 4 to 6 weeks, those are kind of arduous. What we found is that at the executive level, they need the Gantt chart visual, which is not really an agile concept, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we ask from executives is to let us know the sets of initiatives, features, whatever that are important to them. We t-shirt size that on ranges that are agreed. And we give them a Gantt chart based on the team availability and the team construction. So what inevitably ends up happening is you have a core team. I avoid calling them the maintenance team, but they're the critical response team, if you will. And so we need that. Otherwise, there's no predictability. There's no way of ensuring that what we said we would do, we could do, because the moment we said we would do it, you interrupt us with some kind of client emergency. So we need a team that's able to respond to that. We need the critical response team. And so we decide the anatomy of that. And then we look at the budget and we say, well, how many new initiative teams or outcome-based teams can you afford? Really, it comes down to a budget constraint. We decide the anatomy of those new feature teams. And then we take those wants and wishes at a high level that are t-shirt sized, and we Gantt them out based on the number of teams that you have available. And I have been able to successfully hit a year's worth of roadmap on track using that estimation theory of t-shirt sizing. and then putting the agile teams behind that to fuel it. And then that high level plan gets mapped to the sprint plans. And we look to draw the correlation between, hey, are we hitting our ranges? Were our ranges correct? Do we need to reevaluate that our larges are not large or our mediums are not medium? And then reevaluate that to stay more consistent and more predictable. But that's, I think, at the point where you're trying to achieve productivity or predictability to those outcomes, you need to have that organized high level plan.
Is that scalable? So the approach that you're taking, if suddenly tomorrow morning you needed to spin up 175 teams, is the approach, and we won't talk about whether or not that's even, in the realm of possibility, but is the approach scalable?
I think it is. At the point where you were talking about triple digits of teams, you'd be talking about 1,000 people probably.
Yeah.
And I think what you would have to have is a strategic planning layer that was able to break it down into those two pizza team initiatives. I think it's definitely scalable. It's just a matter of now you're talking about a layer of program management over the top of all that to really ensure that you have enough of the executive management going into each team. I have seen a lot of examples of the 10 teams of 10 or that kind of strategy. There's a lot of examples where that's working. I think the challenge is that there's this concept of dinosaurs raising dragons or dinosaurs raising unicorns, right? Can a larger company break themselves up into the small chunks, the small innovative chunks that hit those kinds of objectives that truly innovate? Typically, there's a business problem with the dinosaur type of company or even the large unicorn company that now they're starting to do a lot of work that's more preservative to preserve their market position. And they forget what it was like to be that small team that was innovating and rapidly executing. And Particle's been brought on as a way of isolating that set of innovative work to hit an outcome that might be more exploratory or less related to, the core business. That can be a really good place to bring in some outsourcing to say, hey, we know that our main focus is preserving what we've done. And so, we have a lot of focus on that. But we do see this opportunity. Maybe it's an AI initiative or a DevOps initiative. Like we do see the skills gap matched with an opportunity to innovate. And you can bring in an outside person that still would treat that initiative like a startup and kind of stay away from the critical inertia, that is the managing the core business. So I've seen that be a recipe for success to hit initiatives at scale.
Can that reinvigorate a dinosaur? De-evolve it a bit?
Maybe, maybe like your opportunity there is to raise the dragon, and then the dragon becomes kind of the new focal point for the next horizon of the entity. But you have to start somewhere. And the first way to start is to isolate that initiative and say, hey, this is important. We're going to dedicate some folks to this. We're going to stop asking for favors from our core team to try to get somewhere when that's a recipe for really not innovating and not being successful.
Ben, if you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you your caffeinated beverage of choice and a magic wand and said that you had the power to change any two things that impact software development, what would those two things be and why?
Oh, interesting. I would ask for teleportation. Because I work with people all over the world, and while we still probably wouldn't work in the same office every day, even if teleportation existed. We would certainly like to get together with our friends that we work virtually shoulder to shoulder with. We've started a annual US offsite, one in India, one in Argentina. Like we want to get everybody together at least once a year. But man, I'd love to do that once a quarter if it wasn't cost prohibitive, because we really do love each other and we want to be able to have that FaceTime. So yeah, teleportation would be amazing. I also miss my second wish. I miss a tool called Screen Hero that Slack purchased Slack turned it into their video conferencing, but I feel like it lost a feature, and maybe somebody will correct me on this. But there was a feature that Screen Hero had where it was dueling keyboard and mouse on the same desktop. So it was like pair programming made easy. And I would also go ahead and wave my wand that would exist and that I would own it. Because that, I think we loved when Screen Hero was around. It was so awesome to like jump online with somebody and do a style of pair programming. So I would like a tool that really embraces pair programming easy.
Wow. That's the first time anyone in the 17 years of the podcast has suggested teleportation. But in our distributed world, it would be really nice. I work with people that I know, but I've never physically met before. So that would be wonderful. Ben, how would people continue the conversation? How would they find out about you, find out about Particle 41?
Yeah, you can reach out to me directly at ben@particle41.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Benjamin Johnson.
Ben, at this point, you've in essence given a master sort of summary of how to approach software development to SPaMCAST listeners. The platform's yours to promote anything that you like.
Well, so we're actively seeking engagements the way we typically engage, which is a kind of a starting set of advisory just to see what you have going on and what you want to accomplish. We're also, I'll do some shameless plug of our DevOps as a service. We have a great DevOps team that offers a discount to building your platform, and we've kind of fast track you into containers. And then we're also exploring opportunities with AI actively. But if you need a mobile app created, we love to crush mountains of work. So if you have a skills gap within your organization and you need to kind of have a purpose-built team to go attack something, please do contact me. I think we deliver a really high-value service.
Ben, thanks. This has been marvelous. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've learned a lot. I have a couple of notes where I have to go back and actually re-listen because I thought there were some real nuggets. Thanks again for spending time with the Software Process and Measurement Cast listeners.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And, I really appreciate your insightful questions here. This had a unique feel to it, and it was fun to get these questions and talk about what we do. It got to a level of depth that I don't always get on the podcast, and so I appreciate that opportunity.
My pleasure. In Reread Saturday News, the third attribute of stickiness is concreteness. I spent most of the past week at Agile 2023 in Orlando, Florida. Great time. It was a metaphorical banquet of Agile knowledge. I had more hallway conversations than I can count, ruminating over presentation topics. The third chapter of Made to Stick, Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die, reminded me that language is abstract, but real life is not. Most of the readers of the Software Process and Measurement Cast blog have been to conferences, so reflect on how many ideas and concepts you implemented when you returned to the office. I suspect the answer is very few. This is because few of them were tangible enough to be sticky. Link in the show notes to buy a copy of the book and to all of the installments of our reread of Made to Stick. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 767, sounds like an airplane, doesn't it? We will continue our deep dive into critical thinking. We will touch on the need to understand what valid research looks like and perhaps why authority bias makes it hard to recognize. We'll also have a conversation with Tony Timble, who brings his To Tell a Story column to the podcast. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?